as Richard has already said, for coming. Not one of the better mornings, but thank you. Right. All of you here from the press this week, and I'm not sure whether this is fake news or not, have reported that the Queen has been very dissatisfied with the latest standard of politicians. It's not the word that any of us uses. Disappointed is not our angry, yes, and we cannot understand why we've taken 3 years to get to this point in time over Brexit. So, ma'am, if you're listening, disappointed is not the word we are with our politicians. I can tell you now it goes much deeper than that. What we're here to do in UKIP is to talk about the things that all of you do not like talking about. I'm not going to do this today, but things like the EU Defence Union, which don't come out anywhere in the press, and the things that have happened over the last few years that have been swept under the carpet. That will be our job. The press asks questions, and the same ones all the time. Now, I'm going to become a true politician, and when you ask me a question that I really don't like the look of, and things have happened over the years, I'm going to tell you what I want to answer. And so if you ask me a question on education, I don't like it, I should be talking about the NHS or something else. So questions really now are on our policy. Brexit, we had changed 3 years ago now. And the one thing I remember, the morning after the referendum result was announced, Digby Jones, the ex-Director General of the CBI, when asked what he thought, said, "Good morning world, we're open for business." Now to me, Brexit is a very, very positive thing, not a negative thing. We're all fed up with the negativity. So to me, and UKIP, and to all the rest of us, Brexit is the most positive thing that's happened in this country, not the most negative.
Yeah.
Finally, I want to introduce you to Richard Braine. Now, I'm sure after the last few days he needs an introduction. Richard's been with us for a long time, and he has been giving us great support throughout the whole of the Brexit negotiations. He's taken over, as you know, from Gerard Batten. Gerard, who wrote The Road to Freedom, which is very little quoted, but Gerard, wrote What Should Have Happened. He wrote this back in 2014, how we should have come out of the EU. We haven't followed his instructions, and we are where we are today. Richard has taken over the mantle from Gerard. He's going to make a fantastic leader for UKIP, not for 18 hours, not for 18 days, but I think it's a 4-year tenure that we've got here. So Richard, welcome, thank you very much, the new leader of UKIP.
Thank you very much, Liz. Thank you. As I said, thank you all for coming here today. Very grateful to see you. I'm very happy to see Will and Justin, who I had a very enjoyable drink with in the pub last night by accident. And they said, "I've seen you." And so we had a pint and we had a great evening, and it was good fun. First thing I want to talk about is hate. A lot of people are talking about hate. There's a lot of hate about, actually. And we've got a growing problem in this, my beloved country, our beloved country, the United Kingdom, with extremism. It's a very serious issue. I'm not talking about the secret footage of Islamic extremism preached in some of our mosques. I'm not talking about the carnage on the streets of London, Manchester and Glasgow. I'm referring to a more common form of extremism which has accelerated in the last 3 years, and I think it can be categorized as anti-British racism. Last night I was sworn at, shouted at so aggressively that I could feel his spit on my face, and abused to the point that his friend, his girlfriend, had to restrain him by a young man called John, who works for the Daily Mail. He called me racist and he called me homophobe without offering any reasons for that. I hadn't said anything to provoke that kind of abusive attack. And his hatred was pouring out of his eyes at me. He was full of loathing. And as usual, I remained entirely polite and civil. John, my abuser, is an example of a new extremism which is being fueled by a powerful establishment in this country. Our establishment does the EU's bidding and wants to turn around the result of UKIP's glorious referendum. Powerful members of the EU cult, and it is a cult, in our establishment don't want more people power, they want them power. They want to hold on to it. And they use a great variety of propaganda techniques to do this. And I ask you, the media, actually to cease and desist from stirring this up. Stop calling people uneducated, hateful bigots, racists, scum. Stop calling people far right when they're not far right. Find out what their politics actually are. Be accurate and stop stirring it up. Because the last 3 years, we have seen a concerted effort in the media. We've seen Geordie Gregg installed at the Daily Mail to make sure that it starts to toe the Remainer line. Same things happened to some extent to the Express. And we've seen Sir Nick Clegg getting a very, very well-paid job at Facebook to make sure that nobody can get away with saying what they shouldn't say on Facebook. And we're seeing the press being controlled. And you have a duty to be impartial and objective as journalists. So do that. Because the reporting of Brexit has been so biased for so long now. And I honestly say this, I think the majority of people in this country who voted to leave are fed up with it. And they're developing an increasingly hostile attitude to you, the press, because you are trying to push an agenda. Of course, it's very difficult to change. If your boss tells you you have to do it this way, or if he tells you we're going to do that story and not this story, it's very difficult to push back. But I beg you, do more research, learn more about our brilliant prospects when we do leave the European Union. Understand that the freedom that we're going to gain by leaving is going to enable us as a country to find our own way, to have new ideas, to develop those ideas, to talk about them in politics, to thrive, to trade, to deal squarely with the world, not only fix our country internally with deregulation and all the freedoms that we can gain when we leave, but also to have the freedom internationally to do trade deals is going to be of huge, huge value to this country. Tim Congdon reckoned it was costing us 180 billion a year in lost business, our membership, several years ago. Who knows what the figure might be now. But the main point about it is optimism. The freedom to do whatever you want is always loved by business. Democracy is always loved by business. Business will thrive if it's free to do so. That's the future we have with Brexit. It's very, very exciting. So, coming back to this issue of being abused for being a Brexiter, being abused for being a UKIPper. I've taken a lot of abuse in my life, or most of it thoroughly deserved. You may have seen, an interesting story. Well, not a very interesting story, but George Osborne tweeted something about my name, and I responded with good humour to these tweets because you have to. If your name is Dick Braine, it is. I am like a boy named Sue, and I have had to go through my life dealing with all sorts of situations. I have developed the mentality of Giles Corey, who some of you will know was the, I think, 70-year-old victim of the Salem witch trials, who was tortured so that he would confess to witchcraft he'd never participated in. They put a door on him and they piled stones on him. And before he finally died, his last words were, "More stone, more stone." So there's no amount of throwing that sort of stuff at me that is going to put me down. I actually enjoy it. I did tweet a few days, yesterday I think, the day before, a little poll to see that if I should change my name, should I change it to Gideon or George? And Gideon has come out much more popular than George. But in the introduction, I said that I was getting fed up with people calling me Dick Braine. There was a smiley face at the end. It was interesting to me that I think 2 newspapers so far have printed that as me pleading with people not to call me that, when in fact I was making a deliberate joke about it. So keep it coming, I don't care. Okay. I want to talk about love quickly. There is the love that dare not speak its name. And that love is patriotism, love of your country. UKIP obviously is a party full of patriots. And if you go to a UKIP conference, you will see everybody getting together and talking and having fun and having a drink and talking about politics and talking about the future and actually thinking really hard about the problems that this country faces and tackling them in earnest. In 2017, right after UKIP conference, a day later, I went up to the Tory conference because I had a leaflet to try to persuade Tories that their party was never going to allow this country to leave the EU. And I left one of the fringe events and went down in the lift with, I think, 5 other Tory conference attenders. And as soon as we got into the lift, everybody put their heads down, some of them took their phones out, and nobody talked to each other. Nobody talked to each other. And it was such a culture shock. 24 hours earlier, I was in a lift at UKIP conference, where when 6 people get in a lift, it's a riot. It's a party. Everybody talks to each other. Everybody has fun. Everybody talks about serious things as well. UKIP people are independent thinkers. They are outsiders. They're people who are not just told what to think by the press. They do their own analysis. They make their own minds up. They apply very, very healthy skepticism to everything they see and read, and they enjoy discourse. So it's a totally different culture. It's the reason why I'm a UKIP person. I'm an independent thinker. I'm not easily pushed into a point of view. I listen to everybody. On that note, I'm going to come on to policy forum in UKIP. We're going to build a forum in the party so that grassroots members can actually communicate their policy ideas right up to the ANC and the leadership. I know this is supposed to exist, or has existed sometimes in other parties. I read an email from a Tory in my borough recently that was forwarded to me, describing the situation with their policy channel for grassroots members, and essentially saying that it was just firing messages into the void, that there was no response, that no one ever reads what members have to say about policy and building policy, and that essentially the party is a dictatorship, or at least an oligarchy where the leadership doesn't listen. UKIP's not like that. We have real leadership elections with multiple candidates, not just 2 for the members. We elect our chairman of branches and regions, and we also, of course, elect our NEC, the governing body of the party. So we apply democratic principle everywhere we can. I know there has been a notable case recently where people argue about whether Gerard should have been able to stand, and I think he should have been able to stand. But the NEC is elected, and we'll be hearing more about that later, I'm sure, or in the weeks to come. Our policy forum is going to enable UKIP's manifesto to evolve. It does evolve every few years, every couple of years, it changes. But it never does any U-turns. It never goes off in the opposite direction, because our direction for the last 27 years has been a fantastic direction. And we evolve our manifesto, we look at it, we see if there are things that can be more detailed, we see if there are things that can be changed, and we evolve it and improve it. So we're not going to be doing any U-turns. Our current manifesto is fantastic. The policy forum is going to help us evolve it further with real input from members, which is real democracy, the way it should be in a political party. So to finish off, I just want to go back to a moment in my life that I know some of the kippers here will have very fond memories of. I was at the count on the night of 23rd of June 2016, and at about midnight, I'd read in the papers that if Sunderland came in 61% or above for leave, then we would probably have won. And my opposite number, because I was borough manager for both leave and grassroots out, my opposite number was my MP, Greg Hans, Tory MP, and he had said that our borough was the most Europhile borough in the country. And at about midnight, whenever it was, that Sunderland result came in, and all of my team were there. We'd all worked so hard. We knew that our cause wasn't popular in our borough, but we were determined to get out every single vote we could for something that we believed in. In fact, I personally didn't think we would win it. I thought the odds stacked against us were too much. I thought that the press overall was very biased against leaving. I thought that the institutions of this country were biased against leaving, and I thought that we could never actually push through all of that institutional opposition to our cause. But the Sunderland result came in, and my group all started looking at each other and smiling, because we started to believe. We started to believe that we could win. And it crept up as more results came in, and the excitement and the thrill of knowing that something that many of us had voted for and campaigned for our whole adult lives, decades and decades. This wasn't one general election. This was the election of your lifetime for all of us. And the thrill and the excitement of thinking we could actually win this, and we could actually change the direction of our country in the way that we believe is right, in a way that we believe is going to make people's lives better, in a way that is going to bring our country back as we believe in it and love it. That was one of the most exciting moments of my life. Later that night, we went to Downing Street and to whiz round the cenotaph and beat the horn. There weren't many reporters there wanting to record anybody celebrating. But it was an extraordinary event. I'm very proud of it. We've got so much to look forward to as a result of UKIP's extraordinary achievement. And I want UKIP to go on, one, to defend the Brexit that we won, real Brexit, not Brexit in name only, when it happens, to defend it, and then go on and change this country in a whole range of other ways that will make it better for all of us, for everyone. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Ladies and gentlemen, right, when you go to ask Richard questions, please could you announce who you are? It would help us no end. Thank you very much. Gentleman had his hand up first and we'll come to last one.
So I can just yell, I don't mind.
Yeah, it's small
From
enough.
the garden,
Can you hear this?
Peter Walker. Is it on? Hi. Oh, it's not. Where's the button? Hi,
I can
Peter
hear you.
Walker, Guardian. Thank you. Just a couple of questions. When Gerard left office, I mean, UKIP's been bumping around at perhaps 1 or 2% in polls, but you seem to be saying you're going to be the kind of continuity Gerard, offering the same diet of Brexit, anti-Islam policies, etc., etc. What makes you think that you can actually take UKIP any further than it is now? What kind of new ideas will you offer? And just very, very briefly, if I could, you began your statement by condemning the media, and yet you didn't actually give any examples of things which were wrong. I mean, we've had a lot of complaints from UKIP in the past that, under Gerard, their policy of not talking to the clergy, but we never had any factual complaints to end. We never had to correct any stories. Are you just worried people are just reporting your words accurately and you simply don't like it?
Well, let me deal with your second issue first. Often it's about bias. I'll give you an example. In your newspaper, The Guardian, has stated that in an article 2 days ago that I wanted to ban the Quran.
No, I didn't say that.
Well, the article does imply that, and if you look at it, and it basically tells rather a biased, story of what I said,
I can read the quote
and then
if you
it
want.
prints what I actually said. And there are differences, and I think the point is that what I said was being reinterpreted in order to turn it into what you wanted it to be rather than what it was. Okay, what I did say is that incitement is illegal in this country, and that I think we should look at the specific case of where we see that clearly some of the terrorist acts that have happened over the last few years, well, not in actually, there are 55 countries that suffered Islamic terror attacks last year, so it's definitely not just confined to this country. I think more than 11,000 people were killed last year in 2018 in Islamic attacks. And I think that we need to look at the connection between the scripture that contains those commands, you know, when you meet the infidel, smite him by the neck until many are dead and wounded, and tie bonds on the rest. Allah could have punished them himself, but he sets it as a test for you, some of others. Those verses we need to look at. We need to understand the relationship between those verses and why some people seem to be motivated to go out and commit these acts. We've just seen terrible acts in Australia. We've had a policeman attack this week. It's almost becoming not news now. So I think we need to look very carefully at that and try to understand what the problem is there, instead of pretending, as we have been doing for a long time, Theresa May, David Cameron, pretending this is nothing to do with scripture or religious culture or any of those things.
And in terms of
Your first, can I come back? Can you remind me what it?
Well, basically, if you're just continuity Gerard with a diet of Brexit and Islam, is that going to get you above 1 or 2% of polls?
Well, obviously I hope so. The point about that, I would say, is that don't forget that UKIP bumbled along from 1993 or whatever it was, 1993 I think, up to about 2010 on a very small percentage of the vote. And then, over a period of 5 years, suddenly we achieved a miracle. And in some ways I think that's the nature of being one of the lesser parties in the UK, because of first past the post. That's how you have to play it. You could argue that the Greens have been in the same situation also over the last 20, 30 years. If we get our policy right, and if we manage to get through to people, and if the idea enables us to apply pressure on the bigger parties, on the Tories, on Labour, there is no reason why we can't continue to get our policies implemented, whether we're elected or not. You know, UKIP achieved this extraordinary revolution of Brexit without getting MPs. So don't forget that our system does enable us to put real pressure on the major parties to actually deliver what we want to deliver. So that for a start, we've done it before. That's our goal. It is feasible. We can go forward now, work hard, and put pressure on, and hopefully see more of our policies implemented, even if it has to be by other parties.
Harriet Line at the Press Association. You said in your speech that the press are being controlled in relation to their Brexit reporting. Who do you think they're being controlled by? And secondly, for me, would you consider forming a Brexit alliance with candidates at the next general election to keep remaining MPs out?
Yes. So thank you very much for your question, Harriet. So with the alliance first. We will look carefully, strategically at each constituency and decide whether we're going to stand there. Arguably, we don't have the resources to put out 650 candidates in the upcoming general election, but we will certainly look at it strategically. As regards alliances, well, I'll have to leave that to you to speculate. That will be something that we decide through speaking to others. But I would say this, that in the 2017 general election, we did stand off in some constituencies, mainly to help pro-Brexit Tories. And here we are, years later, and Brexit still isn't delivered. Maybe you're more hopeful that Boris Johnson will deliver it. I worry that he's going to deliver fake Tory Brexit too. I'm very concerned about that. I don't think they will give up that easily. Whether he's really had a change of heart, Amber Rudd is in his cabinet. How can you have a cabinet of true pro-Brexit, a true pro-Brexit cabinet when you've got essentially EU Remainer royalty? I mean, her brother was the founder of the the Second Vote, I don't know what it was called, the anti-democracy movement, whatever it was called, and I understand that one of his children's godfather is Peter Mandelson. I mean, we're talking about people who are very, very connected with the EU power structure, and they're still in our cabinet, and they're still in the Tory party and in government. So I withhold my judgment on that. I think there's a real risk that we're not going to see true Brexit. We're all voting for. Sorry, remind me again.
You said that the press were being controlled. Do you think they're being controlled by?
Well, I think they're being controlled by an EU federalist class. I mean, I would go so far as to say a traitor class, people who are conspiring with the foreign powers against the people of this country. And you know, if you look at, for instance, BBC Question Time audiences, panelists over the last 3 years, you know, it's absolutely, I mean, statistically, it's way off the scale in terms of bias. You know, they hardly ever put real Leave supporters on that show. When they do, there might be one against, you know, 4 other people. So statistically, that is very biased. That's established. It's accepted. There's even been an inquiry about it, I think. But so there's just one example. But of course, if you do your research, you'll find lots of other examples. You know, I've mentioned Geordie Gregg and the Daily Mail being turned into a Remainer rag, and you know, that's been good. That's been going on. So so yes, I think there's a lot of it. You know, we could sit down over hours and go through examples of bias, but I think there is a lot of bias. And I think the main reason for it is that most people who do your job come from your class, your background, your education, wherever it is that most people in your bubble are Remainers. You know, you may not be, but most people who are sitting here in this room who are not UKIPers are Remainers. I mean, we should have a show of hands. but I mean, I suspect that's valid. So I do think that there is essentially the communicating class are Remainers. So that's what you hear.
Shihab Khan, ITV News. A couple of questions for you. You started your speech talking about the hatred that you have had to deal with in recent days and weeks. Would you say
I was joking, but it was a joke.
Would you say that you are part of a group that is now one of the most persecuted in the country? Second question. Are you hoping that Tommy Robinson, once he's released from prison, will continue on this fight?
Yes, this second question, very simple, no. The first question, very simple, no. UKIP people are stalwarts. It's water on a duck's back.
Oliver Milne from the Daily Mirror. You've spoken about the parties and they're trying, I suppose, rebuild from admittedly probably quite disappointing set of results in the European elections. You might not contest certain seats. Is the die not cast? Is Nigel Farage not eating your vote up? Is the Brexit Party not the new UKIP? And did he not say it best himself when he said he abandoned the party and was a spare force politically?
Yeah, well, my view is, thank you for the question, my view is that Nigel more or less checked out of the party before the referendum was won. He fell out with the NEC, didn't like the decisions it made. The NEC makes decisions, usually it does a pretty good job, but he didn't like not having the power to determine who was at the top of candidates lists. That seems to me what the big row was about. I think there were other rows. I think that he has been a fantastic proponent of Brexit, of this great cause that we all believe in, and I'm sure that everybody in UKIP is grateful to him for the time and effort and the great job he did promoting it. No question about that. But he's not a saint, and his current party has no democratic structure at all. I'm not sure what their, you know, if he decides to go off, you know, run off as he did the day after the referendum and go and get a new job in media or something. What will happen to the Brexit Party? I don't know. He'll have to appoint someone. I don't know. Maybe it will be Richard Tice or something like that. But essentially, I can see it merging into the Tory Party. And I think that there are some people who are subscribers to the Brexit Party who will rejoin the Tories. I think probably quite a few will rejoin UKIP. and some may go back to the Communist Party or wherever they came from. So I'm not sure. I don't see the Brexit Party as being a 100-year party. I think it's ephemeral. It looks to me that it's ephemeral. I mean, if Brexit is really delivered properly, then its name will seem obsolete. I mean, I think that UKIP people, I mean, I know that I'm thrilled that there's a whole political party that's being very successful that's named after just one of our policies. Great, I'd love to see Parliament full of parties that are named after UKIP. That would be great, and delivering everything that we want delivered. That's what it's that's what it's all about. So, is that a fair answer to your question?
I mean, electorally, the Brexit performed incredibly well.
Sorry, say again.
Electorally, the Brexit Party performed incredibly well. Do you not think there's an uphill battle to become electorally relevant again? And if you're not winning seats, why do you exist as a political party? I mean, if the Brexit Party could win the seats that UKIP needs to win, why does UKIP exist?
Well, the point there is that the European, ideally we're going to leave, and when we do, those MEPs will be gone. And I think that at that point, the Brexit Party will very likely just disappear. Like Vote Leave did, gone. I can't see it continuing after that. UKIP's different. We've been at it 27 years. The party has an embedded culture of interesting, I suppose, usually old-fashioned libertarian conservatives. If you came to conference, you see, there's quite a lot of old ladies. We've got some brilliant youngsters who come into the party as well now, because UKIP has become the counterculture to some extent. And we're picking. I think Salvation found that we were the second most popular party amongst 18 to 24-year-olds. So the people are seeing that UKIP has been successful, that it has caused a revolution, and hopefully, the party is starting to become fashionable. And I talk about this, what I call the Boomer Millennial Alliance, because we've got all these youngsters who come in who are brilliant, and we've got quite a few older people, and there's a bridge that the gap has to be bridged there, and so that's why I see the party has a future, because we've got youngsters coming in who are excited about the whole idea of independence, of freedom of speech, a lot of things that we're talking about, the ways that we want to change this country, in some cases change it back to a freer country, with a simpler law. And so, I think it's got a great future. We've got the youngsters coming in. Let's keep going. We've got a lot to do. Look at our manifesto. There's a lot of stuff in there that we want to see implemented.
I'm one of the youngsters, by the way, in case you're wondering.
Oh, right.
Anybody else? Any other questions, please? Any other questions from any other journalists? No?
Come on, we must have some controversial ones. Come on.
I've just got a factual question.
Yes.
Yes. I think probably we have people to
I can hear you.
Are you going to still keep on working with Carl Benton and Mark Meacham? What future have they got in the party now?
Yes is the answer. I will. Look, Carl has put online thousands of hours of interesting, sometimes intelligent, often intelligent, discourse and videos. He's a genuinely curious person. He's an outsider. He's a classic UKIPper. There's a really, when Carl came into UKIP, he fits in with the culture. He understands the party understands him. He works very, very hard. He's been picked up on one or two things that he's said, that were provocative, deliberately intended to offend, or whatever it was. But basically, he's it seems to me to be a very sound guy who works very hard to try to get political discourse happening and get people talking to each other. Look at his campaign down in the Southwest during the European parliamentary elections. He went and sat at a table in, I don't know how many, Johnny might tell me how many.
Loads.
Loads, I mean.
2,200 miles.
Okay, so lots and lots of towns in the southwest of the UK. And he sat there with two chairs and a microphone and said, people, come and talk to me. Come and talk to me about UKIP. Come and talk to me about why it's the party that I choose to be in and represent, why it's the party whose policies I believe in more than any of the other parties. Come and talk to me about that, and let's have an open conversation. And the results are electric. And he films it and he puts it on the web, and everybody's free to watch it. Go and look at it, go and enjoy it. And there's, lots and lots of really, really interesting conversations with ordinary, real people out there walking through a town square. And that's what politics should be. It's the old-fashioned soapbox, but Carl does it better, because he's not only standing on the soapbox talking to 20 people, but he's actually putting it online, and it's going out to his more than a million, is it more than a million subscribers? Just under 1 million subscribers. So he's really delivering the message, and he's a fantastic benefit to our party because of that. Yeah, love him, great.
Is Paul Joseph Foxton a member still? He joined at the same time.
He did join. I can't give you that information because I don't have it. I don't know. I'd have to look it up. I did meet him about 6 weeks ago or something, a month ago. Yeah, I'm afraid I can't confirm that. Anything else? Anything else? Come on, we must have some controversies.
Controversies.
Thank you for that correction, Stuart. I've been in trouble for my spelling recently, so
We've noticed.
You said there are sections of the Quran that might be banned if they look towards incitement, and you've used terrorism and violence as the case. In America, in South Church and New Zealand, white nationalist texts, often explicitly referencing the Bible, have been used to generate and justify terror attacks. Are there sections of the Bible that should be examined in the same way as sections of the Quran for radicalising terrorists?
My view is that the New Testament is one of the most exclusively pacifist documents in human lexicography. You know, Christ lived it. He said, no violence, full stop. Put away your swords, turn the other cheek, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. The message is absolutely incontrovertible in the New Testament. And that is the book that Christians are supposed to observe. When the IRA blew up kids and what have you, they were not doing what it said in the religious book. They were not obeying the commands of the New Testament. So I don't see that comparison that you're making as in any way legitimate. In Islam, over 1400 years, we've seen expansionist conquest, jihad, over 500 battles in North Africa and Europe, spreading into Europe. And so I think it's a very, very dangerous thing that you're doing, and I see it done almost every day. People trying to pretend that these two scriptures or religious traditions are equivalent. I don't really think they are. I think they're very different. I think we need to be honest about that and talk about it. And talk to Muslims. Go out and we have a few Muslims still in the party. I think. Unfortunately, we've lost. We used to have more Muslims in the party. I'd love to see more Muslims in the party. But we need to have dialogue. We need to actually have a society instead of balkanization, people living separately. And essentially the separation of cults and peoples is a dangerous thing, and we don't want that to happen. So does that answer your...
Yeah.
I mean, but when it comes in particular to you see there's an epistemological difference between the Bible and the Quran in the sense that the Bible was written, the important books in the New Testament are Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, written by men. The Quran has a totally different status. It is held in Islam, as I understand it anyway, to be the Word of God. Verse Surah 6:115, I think, says no man can change this. Change the Word of God, meaning the book. So it's totally. I think it's a very different epistemological culture. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sorry, there's a young lady there that's not spoken yet.
Elena, is it?
Yes.
Eleni.
Eleni Correa from the Times. Just to confirm, is the Quran the only religious text that you want to examine in relation to the European texts? And what would you say to Muslims who you say you want more of in the party, who are concerned that you're Islamophobic?
Yeah. This is a very complicated question. So obviously the hadith are important in Islamic culture. I am not an expert. I don't know enough about it. I do understand that there are also some very controversial verses or lines in the passages in the Hadith, as far as I'm aware. When it comes to, sorry, the second part of your question was...
What would you say to Muslims who you say you want more of in part?
Yes.
You're concerned that you're Islamophobic.
Well, I would say we welcome you. We want to talk to you. We want to be your friends. We want to share goals. And by the way, I will make one point. During the referendum, I was campaigning at Lord's Cricket Ground, and a car, very fast car, screeched to a halt in front of me. And the man wound the window down and said, "Oh, you for Leave?" And I said, yes. "Oh, great, I must get in touch. Here's my card." And he was a chap called Shuja. And he wanted to be involved in the Leave campaign. And he explained to me that very large numbers of Muslims that he knew were going to vote Leave. The reasons for that are another matter. But the point about, the point about Islam and Islamophobia is that we live together in this country. We need to actually integrate, all of us. And you can't do that unless you actually have dialogue and address the differences in opinion, the differences in culture, the fault lines between the Balkanized areas. So that's what we have to do. Does that answer the question? Now, it doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything. You can love someone without agreeing with them, right?
Is that how you feel about Muslims?
Yes.
Anybody else? Right.
Just on the same thing. In one of the hosting events, you said there's towns and cities which are increasingly Islamic to the point where a non-Islamic person is simply not welcome there. Do you name any of these cities?
Well, I mean, okay, we know that, for instance, Savile Town has become there's almost nobody living there who isn't Muslim. But I've heard and actually seen footage on YouTube actually of people being made to feel very uncomfortable in certain areas of East London. Well, no, I'm not going to. There's no need to. If you want to do your research on that, you're welcome to. Go on YouTube and you will find footage of people being made to feel very uncomfortable. For instance, just for wearing basically Western clothing, short skirts, maybe. Yes. There's been plenty of, there is no shortage of that kind of...
I think that's an everyday occurrence, so it's very rare.
Yes.
There, yes. Absolutely.
I don't know. But I do say that I do think it exists, and it is an ongoing problem. Anything else? Anything else? Come on, we must have a controversial question.
Anybody non-media to ask a question, or it's just media?
No, that's fine.
Go ahead.
Yes. Speak up, Dave.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
We all know that for the past 3 years, I know this absolutely, we have been blocked by the mainstream media because we won the referendum. My God, let's get rid of them. But I joined, and hopefully, I know you're going to take us forward, joined a party that stands up and tells the truth. Now, 3 or 4 months ago, I went across to France with Janice Atkinson and the film crew, and we were filming on the French coast from Calais to Dunkirk up to the Dutch border and beyond, where the French government is saying, no, all of these migration camps have gone. There's nobody there now, they've all gone. Absolute lies. There were dozens upon dozens upon dozens of camps all along the coastline, all filled with young, black, African male men, no women, no kids, specifically there to try to come into the UK, and they are coming across in the UK. Our government are now saying there's 1 million migrants, illegal migrants in this country, where Migration Watch is saying no, there's 3 million. But if I can debate this now, get on to the main cause of this, obviously these guys are getting across in the UK. As an ex-Scotland Yard officer, I would like to ask this question. Why is it that no mention is being made, and I speak now to the people that I used to arrest and deal with on the streets back in the East End of London, I still speak to them. Why is it that no mention has been made of these black-on-black crimes now, knife attacks, acid attacks, the rising gun crimes? You speak to the people that are born and raised in London, the black guys here, they will tell you that is specifically down to and been led by illegal African migrants to this country, specifically, as far as they're concerned, Somalians. No mention has been made of that in the media. We as a party, as far as I'm concerned, because the British people look at it, we should be standing up and speak the truth going forward. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely, we need to speak out about it. And in fact, last year, in David Curtin's Lewisham East campaign, we ran a leaflet that was very controversial. It said, "Stop the carnage." Obviously, we know that hopefully something is now being done about the growing knife crime and other violent crimes in London and elsewhere. So, yes, the issue of, I mean, the anti-stop and search policy is a racist policy because the great majority, as it seems, of victims of this stabathon that we've had are actually people from immigrant backgrounds. So it's disproportionate, and you know that's so. I understand that the Tories are now backpedaling and going to do something about it. I think that Theresa May is probably as culpable in that as Sadiq Khan in making a terrible, terrible decision that has led to a big rise in knife crime. That's that issue. As regards coming over from northern France, why anybody needs to be a refugee from France, you know, I mean, the truth is that where I live in West London, there are a huge number of refugees from all over Europe because they're people who work in finance, and Europe is economically so moribund that they've had to come to Britain for the opportunity because we still have our own currency and we still have the world's #1 finance centre, and that's what they're coming here for. But they don't see themselves as refugees from their own country's moribund economies. They don't blame the EU or the Euro for any of this. They don't see the big picture that that's actually what is driving all kinds of people from Europe to this country for the opportunity. Now, the good people that you're talking about on the coast of northern France, they're the same, they're seeking opportunity. And to some extent, the excessive immigration that we have is taking away opportunity from people in this country. And it's affecting jobs, wages, housing, access to healthcare, hospitals, doctors, schools, transport. We're the fourth, I think England is the fourth most densely populated country on earth. You know, we really do have an overcrowding problem. But of course, our welfare system is so generous that many people are motivated to come here really on a sort of hit and hope, you know, just fingers crossed and maybe I can get there, because if I do get there, it's the land of plenty. And I think also the internet has produced large networks of people who successfully migrate and, you know, send messages back home saying, yeah, get over here, they gave me a house.
Richard, would you agree that UKIP is about freedom of speech and pushing back against most of the media that ironically is suppressing freedom of speech? If I can give you an example, you were contrasting Christianity and Islam. If you took the history of Christianity from the resurrection of Christ to, say, the Milvian Bridge, roughly 300 years, and the first 300 years of Islam, Islam spread from the Arabian Peninsula to Tours in southern France, not by speaking and arguing.
Northern France.
Tours
near Paris.
Well, thank you for the correction, even further. So the spread of Islam was by a particular method. The spread of Christianity was a total contrast to that. So what we want is freedom to critique and examine Islam. That's all we want of the mainstream media.
Okay, I'm not quite sure that I got a question there, but let me just quickly talk about the thing about, you made a point about the media shutting down free speech. We've got wonderful journalists from the Guardian here. Unlike the, I've forgotten their names, but unlike the Mirror journalist sitting next to him, the Guardian, I think, as I understand, you still have comments below the line. Do you still run that?
On some stories, not
yeah.
others.
And the BBC also chose which stories, and some of the newspapers, I think Independent, have more or less removed. Essentially, they found that people freely commenting on the newspaper articles on their online publications is detrimental to their brand. And
that actually wasn't the reason. It's just for legal reasons you have to be able to moderate all the comments. And there's so many more comments, we literally cannot moderate them all. So we tend to have comments open on one story on each particular subject area. That's the only reason. Sure.
I hope you all believe that answer. Of course, if you look at, let's say, Discuss, and if you know Discuss, it's a system for running comments under websites. There's lots of websites out there that do have open comments. In fact, many of the most popular websites in the world, for instance, Twitter, is an environment where people can get an account and post what they like. And strangely, many of these newspapers are not providing the same feature. And it's not very difficult to provide these features. Facebook, obviously, is another very popular website where people are supposed to be allowed to say what they want, although we know now that these websites are being more carefully controlled, if I can put it that way. And Sir Nick Clegg is doing a terrific job at Facebook, as we all know, making sure that people don't say the wrong things. So yes, look, Independent, Telegraph, Times, many of them had comments. Many of them ended up closing them down because they couldn't control the message there, which I think that you more or less just admitted to. You couldn't control the message, which is why you had to shut it down.
No, I get a completely different answer.
Well, you called it moderating.
No, for legal reasons.
I get it.
For legal
understand.
reasons. Because if you tweet, then you as a Twitter user are the publisher, so you're legally liable. If it's a comment under a Guardian story, then we are the publisher, so we're legally liable. It's a different legal thing.
Do you think that Twitter and Facebook should be held responsible for posts on their system?
That is a very complicated subject. One I've not thought closely about.
Okay. I mean, obviously we know this is controversial because of Trump's decision, or effort, I think, a couple of days ago. The point is that these big social media sites have claimed that they're for legal benefits or other benefits, that they are a public forum, that they're like a public service, effectively. And so they've gained some special concessions in that regard. But then when it comes to this question of, are they publishing the material or not? So they're having it both ways. They're controlling the content, but at the same time they're saying, no, we don't control the content. And they're having it both ways, and we need to look into that. That's a very serious issue, and looking forward to something that I want UKIP to start campaigning about, is the extent to which public forums really are public, and essentially the corporate interest of taking control of the internet. I loved the internet in the 90s. Everybody could just stick up anything they wanted, and it was the wild frontier. And this wasn't happening. Whereas now, the control over what you're allowed to say on the internet is it's changing. Right. Who's next? Time. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks very much.
We've got some professional cameras working this time. I thought we've got some professional camera working this time. Didn't have it before,
We will make America great again.